You know, some serial killers just kind of fade into history. But then there are a select few, right? Guys like the Zodiac Killer and the Son of Sam, they become legends. That's because they don't just commit crimes, they build a whole public persona. So you have to ask yourself, was it just a bizarre coincidence that their reigns of terror were so eerily similar? Or did one killer actually learn from the other?
Chilling, isn't it? This was the self-introduction from the .44 caliber killer, the guy who had New York City terrified. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just a confession. Oh no. This was a branding statement, and he delivered it right to the police and the public.
And that right there, that's the key. For a certain type of predator, the murders, they're just the opening act. The real thrill, for them, is the public performance that comes after. The taunts, the letters, the media frenzy. It's like they're putting themselves on a stage, and they crave absolute control over the entire story.
So let's really get into the specific profile. We're talking about killers who don't just hide in the shadows. No, they actively step right into the spotlight. They engage with the police, with the public, turning their crimes into this twisted, terrifying conversation with an entire city.
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to start with the case we actually solved. David Berkowitz, aka the Son of Sam. His crimes, and eventually his capture, give us this rare, complete look inside the mind of a killer who is desperate for that spotlight.
So for one solid year, New York City was basically held hostage. The attacks were random, they were brutal, and they just felt endless. The violence just kept escalating, but the real turning point, that came in April of '77. That's when the killer finally gave himself a name, and the city's fear just went through the roof.
And the final toll was just devastating. 6 people lost their lives, and so many others, like Robert Fialante, who was left nearly blind, were scarred forever. This wasn't some kind of game. This was a brutal assault on an entire city.
And that's exactly why this case is so crucial for our comparison. Because Berkowitz was caught, we have the complete picture. We have his confession, his psych profile, a real conclusion. He gives us a baseline, something solid to measure against the massive, unsolved mystery of the Zodiac.
All right, now let's get to the heart of it. Because when you put the Zodiac and Son of Sam cases side by side, the similarities, they're more than just a little weird. Honestly, they're downright chilling.
I mean, just look at how they operated. It was almost identical. They both went after couples in parked cars, they both used similar weapons, and, most importantly, both of them sent these taunting letters to the police and the press, creating their own twisted brand of terror.
And this isn't just some modern theory we've cooked up. As this quote from a Zodiac discussion forum shows, people have recognized for a long time that these two killers belong to a very specific group, the ones who don't just kill, but who interact, perform, and manipulate on a huge public stage.
Which, of course, brings us to the big question. With so many similarities, you have to ask, was this all just a bizarre coincidence? Or was David Berkowitz actively inspired by the Zodiac, who came almost a decade earlier?
So let's put it plainly. Did the Zodiac basically write the playbook for this kind of terror? And did Berkowitz just pick it up and follow the script? Let's take a look at what the evidence really says.
Just listen to the language they used. Okay, the words are different, but the tone is exactly the same. Arrogant, taunting, and completely focused on building up this terrifying persona. They're both putting on a show for the public, and you can tell they are loving every single minute of it.
So this theory suggests that Zodiac didn't just commit murders. He created a whole vocabulary of terror. You know, the name, the symbol, the ciphers, the direct letters to the press, it was a media strategy. He might have provided a lexicon, a whole set of ideas for someone like Berkowitz to pull from.
But here's where the story gets really complicated. The how might have been the same, but the why, that was a completely different story. When profilers actually looked inside their minds, they found two very different kinds of monsters.
So to get this, we need to know 2 key terms that profilers use. A process-focused killer, well, they enjoy the hunt, the stalking, the fantasy, everything leading up to the crime. But an act-focused killer gets their main satisfaction from the act of murder itself, and they're often driven by what they think is some kind of mission.
So how do these labels fit our guys? Well, Zodiac was all about the process. He loved the game, the manipulation, the power trip. Berkowitz, on the other hand, was all about the act itself. He saw himself as a soldier on a mission, following orders from some higher power.
And this psychological split goes even deeper. Zodiac is often thought to be a psychopath, cold, calculating, totally in control. Berkowitz, though, was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. He's the one who famously claimed he was taking orders from his neighbor's dog. So you've got two very different internal worlds that somehow led to very similar external actions.
Think about it. One was caught, one wasn't. And that one simple fact created two completely different legacies. Berkowitz's capture literally changed the law, while the Zodiac's escape just left a trail of unanswered questions.
Yeah, one of the most significant consequences of the whole thing was the creation of a brand new type of law, known all across the country as the Son of Sam law, and it was designed specifically to deal with the kind of notoriety these killers get.
So what are these laws all about? It's actually pretty simple. They stop killers from cashing in on their crimes. Any money they might make from book deals or movies has to go to the victims instead. But it's not that easy. These laws have been challenged in court, and it forces us to ask what's more important, a victim's right to compensation or a criminal's right to free speech? It's a tough one.
And this brings us right back to our central theme. These killers weren't just committing crimes, they were authors of their own dark stories, absolutely desperate to control how the world saw them.
And here it is, the final stunning twist. You know that whole story about the talking dog? Yeah, years later, an FBI profiler finally got Berkowitz to admit it was all an act. He wasn't a visionary driven by demons, he was a manipulator. He created the whole crazy persona on purpose. He was in control the entire time.
So, in the end, you really have to wonder, who's actually writing the story here? Is it the killer who creates the legend, the media that spreads it like wildfire, or is it us, the audience, that just can't seem to look away?